My main goal is to work with, generally I work with startups, work with a lot of Third Rock-backed portfolio companies here in Boston. I know there's a few of you in the room, perhaps. In addition to working with VCs and private equity firms kind of across on both coasts. So in my role, I work with a lot of startups, a lot of biotechs that are in some cases day zero, right? They just, they're either, it's an idea that they're having and they're just starting to explore it, or in some cases larger biotechs that have historically always been on-prem and are interested in moving what they've done onto the cloud. So that's a little bit who I am. I am not a chemist. I am not a scientist. I have exposure to the industry, and I am happy to go and talk about how I see our customers doing this on the cloud today. But I'm not going to be able to go into the deep science conversations with you guys. There's other people at AWS who, if you'd like to have those conversations, I'm happy to make those introductions. But I stop just right above the science piece of it, unfortunately. So quick question, that was about me, a little bit about you. Who's using AWS today? Or all right. Who's using other cloud providers besides AWS? Okay, a couple. All right, that's fine. So what was it like getting started on the cloud for those of you who, and if you're in Third Rock Ventures, no, please don't answer because they've got a pretty good process. Anybody willing to sort of offer? What was it like? Was it easy? Was it hard? Do you feel like you did it right? No? All right. What's that? A lot of options, yeah. Not very prescriptive. We don't say, hey, you should do this, do we? Yeah, it's kind of a pain. Anybody else? Anybody brave? Okay, that's fine. Who's running ChemAxon on AWS today? All right, with a little handful, about 4 or 5. And what other types of informatics tools are you guys using today, for those of you who are on AWS? Any ELNs? Anybody using ELNs? A couple? All right, awesome. And so what we've done here is we've worked, and this slide that I'm about to show you is actually a John Kelty slide. If you know John Kelty, he authored this slide. But in general, what we see here is a typical biotech journey. So a Series A biotech typically is thinking in the preclinical stage. They're doing initial research, and they have generally a few core needs, right? From a chemistry perspective, they may choose, ChemAxon's obviously the industry leader here, right? From a biology and lab ops perspective, there's other tools that you may need during that preclinical phase. But in order to run all of those tools, you have to have infrastructure underneath it to support that. You need to have compute, you need to have storage, you need to have networking, you need to have, probably most importantly, security. And after a while, and the preclinical phase goes well, Series A, maybe we're approaching Series B, and things start evolving, and, oops, wrong button. And you move into kind of more of a research phase, where you now have HIPAA and SOX compliant needs. You start thinking, doing more around dealing with pharmacology and translational pharma development type of requirements from the science. And then again, you still need infrastructure underlying that to support all that. From now, we're talking more about high performance compute, data aggregation, data mining, things like that. And then sort of the next phase after that, and now you're starting to move into the sort of manufacturing, and you start having GXP type of requirements, right? And so you need to start having QA and QC and regulatory systems and all of that. And all of that also still needs to run on a core infrastructure at the end of the day. And what we've found is that there are several key points of friction as any company, whether they're a small biotech or an established company, running on the cloud, there are these red arrows are almost always a pain, right? How do I deploy my platforms and my requirements onto the underlying infrastructure, right? Typically, that takes people, that takes engineering effort, and you need to have somebody who knows both sort of the systems as well as the infrastructure to get this done. And then, so that's the case no matter what stage you're in. But when you are moving in between these stages and you do have to start overlaying in HIPAA or GXP requirements, that's a whole nother level of complexity that you have to start swallowing. And then if you don't do it right early on, you have this churn. So in the preclinical phase, maybe you just jam it out, you hack it out because you got to get it done. Well, then when you get into HIPAA, you got to go back and redo all that work. And that churn is completely disconnected from the science. There's really no value there to you as a company. And so who generally facilitates these red lines? Well, in some cases, there's usually a platform team. So what does your platform team look like? Anybody willing? Please? Anybody? Is it one guy? Is it a team of guys? Is it a consultant? That's typically what I see. It's either, or in the early stages, it's even sometimes the scientists themselves who say, I need these things and I need to get it done. Sometimes it's just one lone wolf who said, you're the guy. You're the guy who knows all of our infrastructure. You handle that. And then sometimes, and oftentimes if there's money available, it's consultants. And you're not developing anything in the house, and that experience still lives elsewhere. But there's a common theme with all these choices, and they're almost always small teams. Always need to move fast. The science isn't waiting. They want to be able to start turning that crank as fast as possible. And oftentimes you're bringing a company into the cloud. If you're in an established company that's always been historically on-prem, that means you have to sort of move your whole entire company down the cloud adoption framework, right? And that's a big task in and of itself. And that's a problem. That's a real painful experience that everybody in this room is probably going through or will soon if they haven't yet. But let's hold on a minute here. All right? So I just told you how biotechs work, or how we see biotechs working when we're out there in the industry and when I'm out there in the field talking with customers. And ISVs, like ChemAxon, know exactly what their platform should look like if it's deployed properly. So if AWS knows the way that most biotechs generally should structure themselves, and ChemAxon and ISVs know exactly the way their software should be deployed, why is there still a point of friction? And so what if AWS and these ISVs started working, like ChemAxon started to work together? Could we build out a sort of prescriptive biotech in the cloud type of solution? We have a service called CloudFormation, and CloudFormation is what's called is our sort of infrastructure as code service, where we can describe a full-fledged enterprise class secure compute environment, as well as describe ChemAxon's deployment in code. And we can take that code and give it to AWS, and it will spin everything up for you automatically, oftentimes in minutes. So you see where I'm going here? Can we build a platform or a tool that makes it easier for companies like yourselves to start on the cloud on day zero without having to sweat all of that complexity, or having somebody on that team or on the platform team who can do it? And so what we have is the Biotech Blueprint Quick Start. This is kind of an early release. We haven't officially announced this. This is going to be a bigger announcement here in a couple weeks, in 6 weeks from now, also here in Boston. I'm sure I'll see you guys all at that conference as well. But the idea here is that if AWS can handle the infrastructure side, and we can build out in that infrastructure as code type of fashion a core solid infrastructure for you to start launching your informatics in, that'll simplify things. And if we work with guys like companies like ChemAxon, they can help us solve the system piece. And so what we've done is we've built this quick start where in 15 minutes you can deploy the core template. And that creates a virtual private cloud that follows best practices for AWS in terms of having separate preclinical VPCs where your informatics live, management VPC where things like Active Directory or your security appliances live, but then also all the other goodies that just about every company needs: VPN, internal DNS, network address translation, subnetting, bastion host, config rules, just generally all this stuff that you may, if you're an informatics guy or a platform guy, manually doing all of these things could take weeks. And you sometimes pay consultants a lot of money to spin up exactly this thing over and over and over and over and over again. And so we've simplified that down into one CloudFormation template. It takes about 15 minutes to deploy. Now, at the end of that deployment, where you've got all these core infrastructure pieces, you can selectively choose which informatics pieces that you want to deploy into that environment that gets created for you. So that could be ChemAxon. In ChemAxon's case, that means it comes with a database server. It comes with an application server with ChemAxon pre-installed on it. It has a load balancer. It does DNS. It handles the security groups. It handles the subnet locations, makes sure everything gets deployed properly where it's supposed to go. So instead of you having to think about, all right, well, how do I get this software deployed onto the cloud the Biotech Blueprint lets you sort of pick and choose what you need. You need an electronic lab notebook. We've got one of those. You need biologics. We've got ISV participating for that. If you need chemistry, ChemAxon is obviously the go-to there. And so this might get a little technical, but this is more for the platform people if you're curious. But the core template builds what you see here out, right? Like I said, it has a preclinical VPC on the left, which is where all the informatics pieces eventually get deployed. On the management side, you've got your private subnets. That's where you would launch things like Active Directory. All of these subnets, the availability zones, A and B that you see there is what is kind of the main control for high availability if that requirement's ever required. Handles VPN from corporate offices or remote sites. And then all of the other goodies that I mentioned before in terms of real-time alerting for when people are monkeying around with network ACLs when they're not supposed to. It'll automatically alert you when those types of things happen. So all of this, which is historically would have taken a guy like me who does this every day, probably about a month to build all this out, can be done in 15 minutes. This is how long it takes to deploy this. And then for like the ChemAxon template, it will deploy, we have all those defined in code. With the ChemAxon quick start, you say deploy, and it will automatically put the load balancer and the database and the EC2 servers all in the right place where they're supposed to go, and you don't have to think about that. You hit the button, it deploys it, you log in and upload your license file, and then you move along the way. So too technical, didn't listen. Biotech Blueprint is really meant to be a force multiplier for any of those small platform teams. People who need that support, want to get on the cloud fast, do it right on day zero. The Biotech Blueprint is built to do that specifically. So if you're interested in this, come find me. I'm happy to talk about this. Like I said, in about 5 weeks, we're going to make this an official quick start. I'm happy to get anybody in here on the early access to it. There's a couple companies in the room right now that are already running this Biotech Blueprint. So this isn't just a random thing that we put out there. There's I think we've got about 30 companies now running on this, and a good hunk of them. There's a couple in the room, like I said. So email me if you want to get sooner access, and I'm happy to do that. So what's coming, what's the next phase of this? So we just kind of touched on the Biotech Blueprint handling the preclinical phase, right? The next iterations of the Biotech Blueprint are also going to will include additional controls for launching a HIPAA compliant quick start. That will include things like making sure, as best as possible on AWS, you're meeting all of the AWS requirements around encryption at transit, encryption at rest, and all the other HIPAA requirements that come along with our BAA. And then the next phase will be actually releasing sort of GXP-ready solutions and the equivalent systems down the road. So today, we've really got this ready to go. And any company, though, that's brand new to the cloud or is thinking about moving to the cloud, please use this. This will drastically accelerate y'all's journey onto the cloud. If you have HIPAA or GXP needs right now, come find me. I'm happy to talk about that. We've got things that we've got sort of guidance and prescriptive things that I can suggest to help you guys achieve this HIPAA or GXP requirements today before the Biotech Blueprint's ready. And then I finally want to thank ChemAxon for letting us come out here. They are genuinely, and I work with a lot of biotech ISVs out there, they're one of the most progressive out there from a technical perspective, so it's been a joy to work with them. They're very easy to work with, and they're really a leader in this industry. So thank you so much. Any questions before I get?
You showed ChemAxon and the DMZ, which to me is outside the secure area.
Yeah.
It's sort of a public interface, maybe for collaborators. Is there a reason why it wouldn't be more secure than that?
Yeah, so you're referring to the elastic load balancer being deployed in the DMZ? Yeah, the DMZ is actually, in general, where you would put your public-facing load balancers, but we recommend putting these load balancers in here. The VPN solution that I mentioned is set up such that the security group only allows ingress to that load balancer from the VPN appliance itself. And so it's just sort of practice to keep those things there. And if you ever did need to expose it for some reason or the other, it's there. And this is sort of the ChemAxon conventional deployment model. There's also SaaS vendors that are participating in this as well. And I'm happy to show you guys a diagram of what that looks like to sort of make SaaS a more secure solution by using AWS. But come find me after if you'd like to take a look at that.